Hi y'all, and welcome to CISO Art. This video will show you how I've painted this nighttime landscape in acrylics. This is a 12-inch square stretch canvas that I covered in black acrylic paint. You could use black gesso if you have that on hand. Either one would work for this. A friend of mine took these two photographs that we're using for the reference material on this painting. It's kind of simple, so I thought I'd take advantage of the fact that I was using a square canvas and put it on its diagonal. Now, if you choose to do something like this also, just make sure you have a way to fix your canvas very firmly on your easel. And also you want to make sure that it's perfectly vertical and horizontal so that the lines that you paint on there for a horizon, or in our case the deck railing, is going to translate to being level once that painting is hung on the wall. I'm just using a very large nylon filbert brush. This was an inexpensive brush from Walmart, but it works great for laying down large areas of paint. It's probably about 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches wide. You can see that I'm misting my canvas every so often. I want this initial paint layer to be kind of thin, and I'm just mapping out some light areas. And I'm just using a combination of black and white to make a soft gray to start with. Now that that's sort of locked in, I want to indicate the trees in the background, and they're silhouetted, so they'll be very, very dark. But just starting this shape now with a scrubby flat bristle brush, and this is just a dark gray that I'm using. Not quite black, but almost. Now I want to brighten up this area behind the silhouette of this tree line in the distance. So I just mixed a tiny, tiny bit of yellow in with my white, and this is kind of a thin wash. And also trying to pay attention to some negative space around these tree silhouettes, and just want to lighten this up. And I'll use my little, use my little blender brush to smooth out these rough marks. So in case you can't tell, I'm doing a talk over. You know, when I painted this, it was in the studio and there were people walking back and forth and loud music and noises and all that. So I had to, I couldn't narrate while I was painting because I was at the gallery. So I'm sitting here watching this and talking to you guys, and my hands are just going all over the place. I have not learned how to not talk with my hands yet. That's just a behind the scenes. Anyway, I want to smooth out this night sky a little bit before we add the clouds into it. So I'm darkening the top, and I also want to warm it up. So I added some alizarin crimson to this gray mixture. It's a little bit streaky still, but that's okay. We're going to put clouds over the top of it. So if yours is streaky, don't worry about it. Now I'm going back to redefine the edges of the silhouette of the trees at the back of the lake. I'm using an angled, scrubby brush to put the leaf shapes of the trees in there. And I'm using a dark mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. I find richer than just using straight black. And because I didn't mix it with a palette knife, I'm just brush mixing it on my palette. There's some tiny variations in the color that you don't get if you use straight black out of the tube. And it's very subtle. You can't really see it too much per se, but somehow you know that it's there, and your eye can pick up on those little subtle differences and that richer color if you do that instead of using plain old tube black. So try that. I just want to make sure I pay attention to the negative spaces around these trees. And there's no right or wrong on this. It's just what appeals to you. And I do have a reference photo that I'm generally working on. The only thing I knew for sure that I needed to make certain that I copied or was true to life on the photo was the bare limbs of the trees on the right-hand side and that larger mass of tree shape on the left-hand side. Otherwise, the rest is just whatever looks appealing to you in your own painting. So for this deck railing, I'm starting with a dark red color, which is alizarin crimson with a little bit of black in it to darken it. And it's important if you choose to do this painting on the diagonal, like we are in this one, that you make sure at this point when you're doing a straight line that should be level across that canvas when it's hanging on a wall. Again, make sure that it's lined up correctly on your easel. With all the painting we've been doing, it might have, gotten out of alignment a little bit. To finish off this railing is very simple. It's not a complicated thing to paint, but it adds such a nice warm pop of color into the composition. So we just used that darker mix of alizarin crimson and black for the base of that piece of wood, and our highlights are with cadmium red light. And on that side of the wooden railing, we use a darker color just to show that it's turned away from our light source. Now compositionally, in our reference photo, there was a mirror image reflection of the moon in the water. Just another little small circle, just like reflecting the moon above. And I thought it would compete too much with our focal point, which is the champagne glass. So I took that out. Now we're still indicating that the moon is reflecting in the water by making that area directly under the moon the brightest part in our water. I'm sketching in the basic shape and size of our champagne glass using a very light mixture, a thin, watered down light mixture of gray. So I'm blocked in the basic shape with a light to medium gray, and now I'm going to start adding color, and this will be what makes our champagne glass really pop. And remember, it's glass, and so it's going to have a transparent quality to it, and in some cases a reflective quality to it. So just pay attention to the best you can with your reference photo. Now, this situation is a little odd because the reference photo, the picture was taken in full daylight and it was a frosted glass, frosty cold. And here we're doing it at night, so the colors are going to be very different. So try to translate what you're seeing in the reference photo in terms of the colors that it's reflecting, and then interpret that in this setting with the darker background and the darker colors. It's a balancing act. You might have to play with it, but you can do it. I'm starting with yellow ochre as my base undertone for where the champagne will be seen through the transparent portion of the glass, and then I'll go to brighter yellows. After taking a couple of steps back and looking at the overall piece instead of just focusing, very narrowly on these details, I decided the glass needs to be taller. So just using the same colors and the same techniques to extend those lines to give it more of a presence. And also I want to point out that the way that this glass is painted gives us a clue about the viewing angle. In my mind, the person that is looking at this glass is seated in a chair on the deck. And so their eyes are above the base of the glass. So that's why you see that more circular shape. And you're not seeing an ellipse or a circle at the top of the glass because your eyes are actually below the top of the glass. Well, I think I'm finally happy now with the shape and the size of the glass. So now we're going to put in some darks and some lights and start to do some of these final details that will make this glass really sparkle. This is actually a very, very light gray that I'm using. We want to save the pure white for the very end. And this is a layering process, and you just have to go back and forth between the lights and the darks and wait for the layers to dry in between. And that's very quick to do because of the quick drying nature of these acrylics. This was an interesting exercise to paint this glass because our reference photo, was taken of this object in a completely different time of day, different colors in the sky and the surroundings. So our reflections and our highlights are kind of based on experience and what seems reasonable. Now you remember the moon is in the upper right hand side of the painting. So I'm going to actually be highlighting and making the brightest parts of the glass on the left side, as I'm showing you right here, because the light of the moon is shining through the glass because it's transparent, and through the champagne because that's translucent. And so that brightest part would actually be on the left, or at least that's my thinking. Now my friend said this is a Waterford crystal champagne glass, and this bottom portion of the glass part above the stem looks to me a raised crosshatch pattern. So we need to have a little bit of shading to show the depth of that crosshatch work. So we're adding in some darks, and that'll make our lights pop better and have greater definition. I'm also thinking that the reflection of the champagne color would be up on the top rim of the glass. So I'm using that same kind of champagne color and then the straight titanium white for the sparkles. See how just those few little strokes of the pure titanium white really show up because we didn't use straight white to start with on our base layers. So it really pops. And we're working on this moon glow section of the champagne here on the left-hand side as I discussed earlier. I really love the way this is looking. I love the glow. So I'm darkening up some of these areas on the right to increase the contrast, and that will enable us to see that cut work, the raised portions better, and also increasing the contrast will accentuate the glow on the left-hand side. After I covered the blank canvas in black paint, it took me about 2 hours from start to finish to paint this scene. The night sky was very easy. It was just mostly gray and white and black. And the tree line was just dark color, dabbed on. Just a tiny bit of script liner work for the bare tree trunk on the right-hand side. The little water part was very easy too, so that was all quick. And doing that deck railing, that's just a bunch of horizontal strokes, just varying the color slightly. Took some time to do the glass just because of the detail on there and allowing those layers to dry, going back and forth between the dark and light. And also the fact that I had not drawn it out first. I, drew with the paintbrush, so I had to make some modifications. But I like the way it turned out. I almost wish I was keeping it for myself. But no, I know my friend will appreciate it. I'll be giving it to her soon. If you like this video, please make sure you hit the subscribe or the like button. And I'd appreciate any comments, feedback. Would you prefer to see this in real time without my editorial cuts for the repetitive stuff? Or should it be shorter? Anyway, I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate you watching. And I'll see you next time.